On March 21, 1967, a massive tactical gamble backfired in a remote sector known as Zone C, situated about 90 kilometers away from Saigon. In a small jungle clearing, an isolated force of 450 American troops found themselves dead center in the crosshairs of a massive surprise assault. Surrounding them in the thick brush were 2,500 elite Viet Cong fighters, belonging to the veteran 272nd Regiment, a unit notorious for overrunning special forces camps and shattering government battalions. The guerrilla commanders expected a quick, decisive victory. What they didn't anticipate was that this specific target housed 17 heavy 105mm howitzers, led by a battle-hardened tactician, Lieutenant Colonel John Vessey. By noon, the perimeter would be ringed with 647 enemy casualties, and Vessey would secure a legacy that eventually propelled him to chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The assault on Fire Support Base Gold proved to be one of the most devastating miscalculations of the war. To understand the scale of the disaster, you have to look at the geography.
Zone C, located in Tây Ninh Province, along the Cambodian border, served as the ultimate communist sanctuary. Hidden deep within this dense rainforest was COSVN, the Central Office for South Vietnam, which functioned as the nerve center for all insurgent operations across the South. To wipe out this command hub, the U.S. military launched Operation Junction City in February 1967. This massive dragnet deployed over 30,000 troops, combining 22 infantry battalions, 17 artillery units, and thousands of airstrikes into a giant anvil designed to crush the communist leadership. Instead of retreating into the dense wilderness to wait out the storm, the communist commander in the south, General Nguyen Chi Thanh, made the controversial decision to stand and fight a conventional pitched battle. While his legendary peer, General Vo Nguyen Giap, the mastermind behind the historic victory at Dien Bien Phu, warned that charging directly into American industrial firepower was sheer madness, Thanh believed his elite regular units could break a standard U.S. defensive line.
On March 19th, transport helicopters began dropping American artillerymen into a clearing near the abandoned settlement of Suoi Tre to construct Fire Support Base Gold. Within hours, the outpost took shape as a star-shaped perimeter packed with foxholes, protective trenches, concertina wire, and heavy quad-mount 50-caliber machine guns. This fortified hub was commanded by the 44-year-old Vessey, a veteran who had previously earned a battlefield commission under fire at Anzio during World War II, long before he would eventually advise the White House on nuclear strategy. The attackers completely ignored blatant warning signs. 11 days prior, a sister outpost named Prek Clock 2 had been assaulted. In that engagement, the American defenders lowered their massive howitzer barrels to fire horizontally, blasting charging infantry waves at point-blank range and leaving nearly 200 attackers dead for the loss of just 3 Americans. Rather than learning from this tactical disaster, Tong's officers merely regrouped and scaled up their plans for an even larger raid.
The assault on Base Gold began with a preliminary ambush on March 19th. When booby traps hidden in the landing zone destroyed 3 arriving helicopters and killed 15 troops. By the night of March 20, forward scouting units reported heavy movement, whispered foreign dialects, and the metallic clinking of weaponry in the dark. The trap was sprung at 6:30 the following morning. A devastating opening barrage of 650 mortar shells tore through the American compound, flattening bunkers and shredding defensive lines. Right behind the explosions came massive human waves of infantry rushing from the eastern tree line, firing automatic rifles and rocket-propelled grenades. The main hammer blow slammed directly into Company B, while a diversionary probe pinned down defenders on the western flank. The 272nd Regiment brought an overwhelming arsenal to ensure a total massacre: 50 rocket launchers, dozens of machine guns, and thousands of grenades. Their objective was to annihilate the camp within 2 hours and then ambush the inevitable relief columns.
By 7:11 a.m.,
the eastern line collapsed and insurgent fighters breached the interior. Overhead, a tiny forward air control plane directed F-4 Phantom jets to drop napalm dangerously close to the American trenches, incinerating groups of attackers in the open. Despite the heavy casualties, the waves kept coming, and by late morning, the defenders were entirely out of ammunition. In a moment of pure desperation, the ground commander requested beehive artillery shells to be fired directly into his own overrun positions. By mid-morning, the northern flank gave way as well. One of the vital quad .50 machine gun nests was completely surrounded, forcing its crew to destroy the weapon with thermite grenades before it could be turned against the camp. Enemy soldiers were now a mere 15 meters from the primary artillery line and just steps from the medical tents where wounded men lay trapped. This was the exact moment the guerrilla gamble dissolved into absolute ruin. Vessey sprinted straight toward his crumbling gun line.
Though 14 of his 17 howitzers had been severely damaged by the initial mortar strikes, he personally rallied his remaining crews and supervised frantic repairs under heavy rifle fire, bringing the big guns back online within minutes. Vessey then authorized the brutal tactic that would win him the Distinguished Service Cross. He bypassed the complex time fuses normally used to explode shells high in the air and ordered his men to level the massive 105mm cannons horizontally, firing M546 anti-personnel beehive rounds at point-blank range. Each single shell acted like a massive shotgun, unleashing a cone of 8,000 razor-sharp steel flechettes traveling at 1,000 meters per second. The artillerymen fired these massive cannons directly into the charging crowds from distances of 75 meters, then 50 meters, and eventually as close as 15 meters. The battalion expended 40 beehive rounds before switching to standard high-explosive shells, firing them like giant rifles into the oncoming ranks. Over 2,000 total artillery rounds were detonated horizontally that morning. Survivors later recalled finding enemy casualties stacked 3 and 4 deep inside the defensive trenches, where the steel darts had utterly decimated the charging formations. While the artillerymen held the center, a mechanized relief force was racing against the clock. Having heard the emergency radio calls, infantry units hacked through 4 kilometers of dense bamboo jungle under constant sniper and mortar fire, reaching the southwestern edge of the camp by 9 a.m. to launch an immediate counteroffensive. The definitive turning point occurred 12 minutes later. A heavy task force of M48 Patton tanks and M113 armored personnel carriers arrived from the southwest. To cross a deep, muddy riverbed that had blocked them for 24 hours, the engineers intentionally sank an armored carrier into the river to act as an improvised bridge, driving the heavy tanks right over it. The armor crashed through the jungle foliage, clearing the outer flanks with heavy machine guns and canister rounds filled with thousands of steel ball bearings. By 9:30, the perimeter was secured, and by 11:45 a.m., the fighting was over. The elite 272nd Regiment was completely shattered, leaving 647 dead on the battlefield, with hundreds more dragged back into the jungle. The Americans suffered 31 killed and 187 wounded, establishing a lopsided casualty ratio of over 20-1. General William Westmoreland, head of all U.S. operations in Vietnam, arrived by helicopter later that afternoon to view the mass graves dug by bulldozer tanks, believing the outcome vindicated his controversial strategy of attrition. Ultimately, the raid on Base Gold proved fatal to the regional insurgency for 3 distinct reasons. Tactically, the commanders severely underestimated the catastrophic power of direct-fire artillery. Operationally, they repeated the exact same mistake they made 2 weeks prior at Prek Cloak, expecting a different outcome. Strategically, the loss of the 272nd Regiment forced the High Command to rebuild the unit using regular conscripts from the north,
permanently erasing the irreplaceable local knowledge and deep community roots possessed by the original Southern fighters. This immense disaster fundamentally shifted the course of the war. Recognizing that frontal assaults on fortified American bases were entirely suicidal, Kazvan abandoned the jungle strategy and opted to target major urban centers instead. This pivotal shift in thinking led directly to the planning of the massive Tet Offensive in January 1968, an operation that would fundamentally shock the American public and alter the political landscape of the conflict.